Greetings, Internet, and welcome to Parsing John. Today we are going to be finishing up our comparison of the Greek and Latin text. Got our Greek right here, verses 16 through 18 of chapter 1, and our Latin right here in the different color, which should be easier to distinguish from the Greek. Well, in our last text, the Latin did not do so well. It had some temporal issues, and it had some who's talking about who issues. So maybe verses 16 through 17 will do a little bit more, and maybe when we have the context of all of this together, 16 and 17 will make sense. All right, so we've got, we should probably include translation of the last bit of verse 15. All right, before we get into that. This one was who I spoke of. The one coming after me has become ranked before me because he was before me. Because we all received from his fullness. All right, so that gives us the context of this. And because we can take a look at verse 15, that actually gives us a better idea of what's going on here. This is because he was ranked before John, at least a little bit clearer. All right, looking at the Latin. And we now know this should be nominative, not accusative, because this is nominative, and we all have received from his fullness. Okay, take a look at this. The only difference is we got an hoti, because we have an et in Latin. A minor difference there. It does change the meaning a little bit, so that's actually points against Latin, if you will. All right, let's move on. And grace upon grace, or grace for grace. And in the Latin, we've got and grace for grace. So if we were to take anti as the for translation, which we didn't, then this would be a perfect match. But it is still essentially the same idea between pro and anti with the genitive. So no issues there. They are still pretty close. Latin is stumbling along reasonably well. All right, verse number 17. Because the law has been given through Moses. And verse 17 in the Latin. Because law has been given through Moses. We have got an aorist tense there and a perfect tense there. And if you recall, the Latin perfect is as close to the aorist as Latin is able to get. So they are equivalents. These two clauses match perfectly. All right. The grace and the truth became through Jesus Christ in the Greek and in our Latin. Grace and truth has become through Jesus Christ. So on the face of it, they look very, very similar. We've got became an aorist tense, and we've got perfect. And we've got a deponent, but it's got a passive meaning. And we've got a passive tense here. So these two verbs work. This is a singular, this is a singular. But we've got a plural subject kind of smooshed into a singular subject in our Greek here and in our Latin here. So these two clauses actually match better than all of the rest, if you will. All right, I'm going to fold Latin so you can keep track. All right. Okay, verse number 18 now. No one has ever seen God. And in Latin, no one has ever seen God. Exact correlation here. We've got a perfect tense and we've got a perfect tense. Got direct object, no one, ever. Good so far. Okay, now into our next clause. Only begotten God, the being on the chest of the Father. Weird sentence, honestly. And we've got only begotten Son, who is on the chest of the Father. All right, so these two match up quite well, except that the Latin has filius. But if you recall, and if you stayed around for that oops part at the end of the video looking at verse 18, some versions of the Bible, of the Greek New Testament, have huios instead of theos, and huios is, of course, son. So this is not actually a error in the Latin. It's just the Latin is taking from one of those versions of the text rather than the version that we had right here. No issue there. No change in meaning. All right. Except from our version. and our version, I believe, is the more authoritative of them. But we can forgive the Latin for that. All right. So far so good. Sinu means either chest or folds of a toga, and clopon means chest. Those two fit. Of the Father. So far so good. And then we have that one revealed. That one being the subject. Revealed what? We don't know. And in our Latin one, we've got himself explained. Explained what? No, we don't know. Ipse here has the similar problems that we found with Achanos. We're not sure who Achanos is talking about, and we're not sure who Ipse is talking about. Ipse likewise could go back to unigenitus filius, just as Achanos might go back to monogenes theos. So those are basically the same, but exegesato and eneravit, they do not match quite as well. It could be that the translation that I got for this one is not as broad, didn't have quite all the options that are actually native to eneravit. So these two could be related, but in the way that I've translated this and what I found about this word, these do not have the exact same meaning. It's a minor change. He explained something versus he revealed something. They're roughly similar ideas, but still a slight variant on Latin, when Latin had actually, I think, a couple different verbs that could work quite well to get this one. All right, so going through our texts, in our previous video, the Latin did not do so well. It had a bunch of issues. In here, I don't think we had any issues. We actually had a lot of instances of exact duplication, and yet still correct Latin fits, except this one, which was just weird. All right, so far so good. Ipse rather than Achanos. The proper word to use to be the equivalent of Achanos would actually be ille, illa, illud. So that's a strange choice by our Latin author there, but ultimately a minor problem. The real issues with the Latin text come from our previous section. So we have got, where did it go? De ipso, that being the huge problem with the Latin text, possibly even changing entirely what's being said here. Clamat's the wrong tense. Venturus is a strange choice, but not too huge of a deal. So this text, the rating that I would give it based on the varying errors, this passage, I think the previous one I gave a B+, and I can't remember even what the problems were there. But this one I'm gonna downgrade it even further, and I'm only gonna give this one a B. There we go. Well, I hope taking a look at these two texts together, seeing how well the Latin matches up with the Greek, and hearing my completely unimportant grading system has been helpful to you, and I hope that you continue to join me as we take on our next text. Or not text, next passage. All right, everybody, have a good day. Try not to fall asleep while watching my next video. Farewell.